Fallout Equestria, Finding Rainbow Dash, by Civil War Pony, read by Forrest. Chapter 1, Preparing to Leave. Fluttershy sat watching a new day dawn over the canopy of the Everfree Forest. Seeing the sun rise over Equestria, driving back the dark of the night, was a perfect metaphor for how things were since the Great War, she thought. Rebuilding the world after she had a hoof in destroying it was a slow and agonizing process. There were still groups of red-eye holdouts all over Equestria, even with the Talons guarding the skies and watching over pony convoys as they traveled the land. But that wasn't enough to keep every pony safe. Numerous times Fluttershy had tried to appeal to the Grand Pegasus Enclave for help in patrolling the skies and watching out for their earthbound brethren. But these appeals for help had fallen into deaf ears. Civil war was brewing amongst the Pegasus community. The Dashites had formed their own city in the clouds, calling it New Cloudsdale. What the Pegasi needed was a leader to unify them again. The problem was that finding a leader would be difficult. The Enclave had made a nasty habit out of assassinating any Dashite they found. Recently, some information had been brought to Fluttershy's attention. The Enclave kept extensive records on every pony that left and became a Dashite. These records also included information on the very first Dashite, her most loyal friend, Rainbow Dash. What happened to Rainbow Dash had haunted Fluttershy since Littlepip sacrificed herself in order to bring stability to Equestria some 15 years ago. Now that there was a relative peace across the land, Fluttershy hoped that Rainbow Dash's fate may finally be discovered. A knock at the door woke Fluttershy from her thoughts. Trotting over to the door, she opened it to see Gem standing there. Gem was an earth pony with a light green coat and sky blue eyes. Her cutie mark was 2 scrolls curled around a diamond. Gem acted as Fluttershy's secretary, sorting out what information she needed to know about the current day-by-day events in Equestria. Gem handed Fluttershy a modest-sized clipboard with a small stack of papers attached to it. The information Fluttershy was reading had been obtained by a Dashite who had recently left the Enclave. As she flipped through the stack of small papers, she noticed the phrase, "Tomb of Dash," repeated over and over again. Fluttershy says to herself, "What in the hay does that mean?" Gem watches as a concerned look crosses over Fluttershy's muzzle. She asks, "Ma'am?" Fluttershy blinks, then looking at Gem, saying, "Find Airborne and bring him to me." Gem nods and exits Fluttershy's office. Airborne sat against a large, pock-marketed boulder, his faded tan cowboy hat pulled down over his face. His coat was a light gray color. His cutie mark was a white parachute with a yellow star attached to the end of it. His ears perked as he hears something. Opening his eyes, he sees a small shadow approaching him. Stretching out his wings and basking in the sun while he can, he waits a little longer as the small shape approaches closer to him. Training his battle saddle on the target, he prepares to bite down on the gun bit when the form cries, "Airborne, it's me!" Airborne doesn't fire, but cautiously lets the pony approach. As the pony gets closer, he sees its Starshine, a Pegasus pony that left the Enclave with him. Airborne always admired Starshine, even when they were still living in the Enclave. Her coat was white and her mane was red, though it was covered in dirt. Her green eyes looked at him, and she says, "It had been forever, Airborne. Glad to see the Enclave hasn't killed you." Airborne smiles. "Good to see you too, Starshine. What brings you to these parts?" Starshine looks into Airborne's blue eyes and says, "Fluttershy needs you." Airborne shifts from hoof to hoof and ponders it over. Why does she want to speak with me? Starshine says, she said it was important and the location of something called the Tomb of Dash has been found. Airborne's jaw drops slightly and replies, fine, I'm going to come with you. Starshine smiles and says, follow me. Starshine flaps her wings and lifts off with Airborne following closely behind. Only a few hours later, they arrived at Fluttershy's compound. Landing in the courtyard of a heavy fortified square, Airborne looks around at the various ponies patrolling about on the walls, weapons slung around their necks. Others who could use magic levitate them and point the weapons out over the walkways at the unforgiving expanse of the wasteland. Airborne trots behind Starshine, following her to Fluttershy's office, passing through numerous security checkpoints guarded by some heavily scarred guards. At the first checkpoint, Airborne was forced to remove his battle saddle, and without it, he felt vulnerable. The two entered the office. Fluttershy turns, saying, hello, Airborne. It has been a while, hasn't it? Airborne sits down in a chair in front of her desk and says, yep, it sure has been, Fluttershy. So what do you want? Fluttershy grins and replies, blunt as always, Airborne. I can see you want to get down to business, so here's my proposal to you. Airborne takes an apple from a bowl on her desk and bites into it and says, well, let's hear it then. Airborne continues to chew on the apple while Starshine stands behind him waiting for Fluttershy to spill her secrets to Airborne. She says, as you know, the Enclave is still refusing to cooperate with us in helping to protect Equestria. Despite the Talon's best efforts, they haven't been able to protect every traveler on the roads. Frequent bandit attacks still plague many merchant ponies and others traveling the roads from coming and going as they please. Another problem is that the Pegasus Enclave now faces all-out civil war with the Dashites, who they have been hunting with extreme prejudice. You, Airborne, are one of the lucky ones. You have managed to both survive in the wasteland and avoid the Enclave assassin squads. Airborne nods in agreement and smiles slightly. Fluttershy continues to say, what the Pegasus community needs right now is a leader, someone whom every pony would listen to and follow. Which is why I need your help finding a very old friend of mine, and someone I'm sure you are very familiar with. From what I understand, Fluttershy, most of your friends died in the war. The one I am sure you are alluding to hasn't been seen in a very long time. In fact, no one knows what happened to her. Not even the Enclave managed to uncover her whereabouts. Fluttershy says, that's where you're wrong, Airborne. They did know her general whereabouts, if not her exact location. Airborne stands up and yells in frustration, general whereabouts? You mean to tell me that you call me in on some wild pony chase when you don't even know where Rainbow Dash is? The guards outside the room say, Miss Fluttershy, are you okay? Do you need help? Fluttershy calmly says, no, that won't be necessary. I am quite all right. Looking back at Airborne, she says, please calm down and let me explain. Airborne sits back down in the chair, breathing heavily. Fluttershy goes on to say, tell me, Airborne, how long has it been since your family has lived with the shame of lightning dust? Airborne tries to say something, but tightly closes his mouth and slumps down into the chair, hiding his eyes beneath the brim of his hat. He slowly lifts his head and says, it has been a long time since my many times great-grandmother was kicked out of the Wonderbolt Academy for her recklessness. She always carried the shame of her expulsion with her, even when she found possibly the only good thing to come out of her time at the academy, her meeting my great-grandfather Thunderlane, who she shortly married thereafter. But even having kids with Thunderlane, the shame of her time at the academy was still present. When she fought in the war against the Zebras, she was wounded during the fighting and brought to Cloudsdale Veterans Hospital the day when everything came to an end. The day the Zebras destroyed Cloudsdale with their balefire bombs. The shame was still there. When her life was extinguished, incinerated in the briefest of seconds by the apocalyptic flame, there was nothing left of my great-grandmother. Only her shame remained. Thunderlane died shortly thereafter when Manhattan was destroyed by the bombs. He was stationed there prior to the city's destruction. Since then, generations of my family have carried Lightning Dust's shame and have sought to cleanse the sins of my lineage. Fluttershy's eyes soften as she looked at Airborne's. Then she replies, "I can offer you that chance, Airborne. You need but to find Rainbow Dash and bring her here so she can help us keep the peace." Airborne asks, "How do you know she is still alive?" Fluttershy says, "Gem, hand me the terminal transmission, if you please." The small pony behind Fluttershy places the small tablet in front of Airborne, who watches as the screen flickers to life, as a face appears. The screen shows the face of a sky blue Pegasus with purple eyes. The Pegasus says, "I never meant for any of this to happen. Everything is lost because of me. As everything ends, I cannot help to think back to a happier time with my friends before the war. In the end, I should have refused the princess when she offered to make me the head of Ministry of Awesome. But regrets have not gotten me this far. Please, if anyone gets this message, I'm currently hiding in..." The message cuts out and Airborne looks at Fluttershy, then asks, "Well, where's the rest of it?" Fluttershy replies, "We don't know, but there are rumors that before the end of the war, Rainbow Dash imported massive amounts of arcane technology and unknown magic from the Crystal Empire. Airborne, I need you to travel to the ruins of the Crystal Empire and uncover any records of what Rainbow Dash was doing, and maybe then we can get a better sense of where she is." Airborne mulls it over and says, "You can count on me, Fluttershy. I'll bring you back any information on what Rainbow Dash was doing in the Crystal Empire." Fluttershy smiles and replies, "Very well, Airborne, but you will not be going alone. Starshine, you will be going with him, and I will send Celestial and Darkstar with you as well." Airborne nods and says, "I'll need some supplies before I go, and I could use a rest before then." Fluttershy says, "We will give you everything you will need before you go. Until then, Gem will show you to a room where you can stay and rest." Gem gestures to Airborne to follow her, and they leave Fluttershy's office. As they leave, Fluttershy turns to Starshine, saying, "It is of the utmost importance that Airborne finds Rainbow Dash. Please ensure his safety, whatever the cost." Starshine nods and responds, "Understood, ma'am." Airborne was escorted to a small room with a bed. Through the broken shade slates, a small amount of light that only illuminated the corner of the room. Flopping down onto the bed, Airborne tips the brim of his wide hat down, thinking, "I can't remember the last time I slept on a bed." Hours passed before there was a knock at the door. Pushing the brim of his hat back on his head and opening a bleary eye, Airborne says, "Come in." Starshine trots through the doorway, smiling at Airborne, saying, "So are you ready?" He nods as he stretches his stiff muscles, then asks, "When do we have to leave?" Starshine replies, "In a few hours, just enough time to stock up on supplies." Airborne leans over the side of the bed and says, "All right, let's go." Airborne checks his battle saddle for wear and tear. Starshine stood in a nearby tent, collecting ammunition they would need for their long journey. Two ponies stood nearby, One had a black coat with a deeply scarred face, and his cutie mark was a star. The other wore heavily reinforced armor barding with 2 automatic shotguns on her battle saddle. Her face was hidden by a gray mane. Only one emerald eye peered out from underneath. Starshine trots over to Airborne with the 2 ponies following behind her. The dark pony smelled surprisingly of apples. Airborne wasn't exactly sure how that was possible, given that apples had become a rare commodity in the wasteland these days. Starshine stops in front of Airborne and introduces her companions, saying, "Airborne, this is Darkstar and Celestial." Darkstar says in a gruff voice, "Hello." Celestial doesn't say anything, and Airborne smiles awkwardly at her and tentatively says, "Hi?" Starshine apologizes and says, "Sorry, Airborne, Celestial can't talk after the raiders cut her throat." Celestial leans back, showing an ugly puckered scar across her throat. Airborne tries not to stare, but instead smiles at Celestial, who smiles back in return. Airborne looked back to Darkstar and embarrassingly asks, "How come you smell of apples? I thought they disappeared from the wasteland." Darkstar laughs. "Well, a few years back, while I was acting as a mercenary for a caravan leaving Fluttershy's compound, one of the merchants sold me a bottle of pre-war cologne that happened to smell like apples. Ever since then, I wear it before any job I happen to go on. Call it my good luck charm. It also drives some mares mad. Am I right, Celestial?" Darkstar nudges her with his elbow, but she brushes it away, although Airborne could have sworn she saw the faintest hint of a blush beneath the silent pony's mane. As Airborne loading supplies into his saddlebags, Fluttershy trots over to him. Every head in the compound swivels to look at her as she approaches Airborne. Airborne looks at Fluttershy and says, "Hello, ma'am. What can I do you for?" She replies, "Airborne, I wanted to thank you for taking on this dangerous task, and to say, please be careful out there." Airborne nods and replies, "I will be, Fluttershy." A few hours later, Airborne left the compound with Starshine, Darkstar, and Celestial following behind him. Making their way towards the nearest rail line at an outpost located not far from a Fluttershy's compound. Airborne thought that the wasteland had changed a little since he left the Enclave. It was still as barren as the day he had arrived, covered in twisted metal fragments and burnt husks that were once some pony's home. Here and there a skull dotted the landscape, where the grass and other small shrubs sought refuge in the ruins' shadows, desperately trying to escape from the harsh sunshine. In this endless monotony, the shapes of a distant settlement brought any traveler to tears at the thought of getting out of this depressing setting that was once a beautiful land filled with life, that now only contained death in every form. Airborne had become used to the brutality of the wasteland. It has sunk into his very soul. He had seen ponies kill each other over water, spare bullets, and scraps of dirty blankets. The fact that his own people have left the ponies of Equestria to live in such a misery made his heart heavy as they approached the outpost. As the group approached the outpost, Airborne looked at the pitiful collection of ramshackle buildings that seemed to be only held up by time itself. The wooden frames had long since rotted to the point where a strong wind could blow them over. They were held together by bits and pieces of metal, either nailed together or held in place by old lengths of frayed rope. A train was parked on the rails in front of the station. The engineer and conductor stood up on the platform discussing something when they stopped and saw Airborne's group approach. The engineer pony, a gray buck with a faded cap perched back on his head, opened his mouth and says, "You must be the group Mrs. Fluttershy told us to expect." Airborne nodded and replies, Yep, we are. She said you can get us to the Crystal Empire safely. The conductor looked at the engineer, who cracked a smile before the both of them started to laugh. Airborne looked at them, then to his companions, who shrugged in confusion. I guess I missed something because I don't get what's so funny. The engineer pony, looking at Airborne, replies, Son, the trip to the Crystal Empire ruins is treacherous. You think this wasteland is bad, just wait till we cross the frozen hellhole that the Empire has become. Airborne gulps nervously and took 2 steps back from the train, getting ready to run. He bumped into something and turned to see Starshine standing there. She says, Whatever challenges we face in the Empire, I got your back. We all do. Airborne stops and looks at her, then to Darkstar and Celestial, who nod their heads in agreement. Airborne boards the train and takes a seat by the window, with Starshine settling in on a bench opposite to him. Darkstar takes a seat at the front of the passenger car, with Celestial sitting at the rear of the car. As the train lurches out of the station, Airborne tips the brim of his hat down and says to Starshine, Let me know when we get there. She replies, I will. Airborne settles down on the bench and slips into the comforting arms of a blissful rest as the train steams north towards the frozen remains of the once great Crystal Empire. End of Chapter 1.